point, they had an 11-point game that factored into their consideration 3 years ago. So that's where everybody was scratching their head. That's where that came from. So that was the one that I did not have in my preliminary runs of it that I did in-house while I was waiting on DOE to give us the official list. And the other one, Imagine, had snuck in there that I didn't account for. And so with those also, to benefit the schools, DOE did at least estimate up. Like Leesburg, for instance, say it came in at a 2.67 on my calculations. They rounded them up and used a whole number with 3 to qualify them. So there were a couple that came in like that. So as we look through that first pot is up to 4,000. I noticed in you guys' MOU, as we were kind of putting some nuts and bolts and framework together on it, it stated that the only part that was negotiable was the portion for recognition. But the way the language reads of up to $4,000,
so we can determine.
I think that it's definitely a bargaining point to determine what that recruitment dollar is going to be, because that's going to drive that bottom bucket of what's left over. So that'll be a part that we'll include in there. So then that retention part, where it's $2,500 for highly effective and $1,000 for effective, that are on those lists of 19 schools. Those numbers, because you have to be, there's the stipulations of having to be there 2 consecutive years, whereas we flush out our data here as September closes out and we've about got everybody in the saddle. That's data we're currently processing also to see, because that affects the bottom bucket also. If I had to guesstimate, it's going to be somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million that it pulls out of the bucket for those, because there's 19 schools that are eligible. And also keep in mind, of the 4.2 million that was allocated to Lake County, our friends at the charter schools will get their proportionate shares off the top. So that brings that number down a decent amount. We'll probably fall in somewhere around 3.6 million that will come in that we'll be looking to work with. So those are some ins and outs on
Is there a
best and brightest.
differentiation in amount between annual contract and PSC? Because I don't think the legislation, it didn't specify, so I'm just wondering.
No, it did not, and I don't have much interest in that. So unless you guys do.
Nope.
No. They pit teachers against one another too often as it is. So then also I will say, I think out of the we had 10 principals that qualified, and the principal bonus, as you know, likely is $5,000. But out of those 10, 4 were charter and 6 were regular Lake County schools. And if you look at it as, wow, that's not many out of the total group. It was cut down a lot because we had a lot of new principals in buildings of schools that could qualify. Sorry.
Yeah.
So
Can you specify what schools those are?
Yeah, I don't have the list on me today, but I can definitely. Part of why I did not ask the superintendent to announce those the other night at the meeting was I wanted to double check, and I wanted to notify those principals before they heard about it in a meeting or because it is narrowed down to an individual. So my goal is to, as we solidify all of our data for the Best and Brightest as a whole, we have all those data points and we can communicate it effectively there.
I didn't see the tape for the Monday meeting. And I just heard what you said as far as crossing T's and dotting I's. Is the list of schools that she rattled off published? Like on the website?
It is. It's on the meeting, and he probably has it, and I can send it out.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Can you read them off very quickly?
I love it actually, because I can't be catching tales of this. I mean, I got a 3 here and 2 1s, and I just was like, I wrote it
correct
all.
me if this list is wrong. This came from FEA's DOE list?
What I can tell you, my list and FEA's list were probably very close and similar, but the only one that matters is DOE's. So let me
Well,
pull it up.
they pulled from DOE, so.
Okay.
Sawgrass Bay, Eustis Heights, East Ridge Middle, Seminole Springs, Round Lake Elementary, Tavares High School, Tavares Middle School, Mineola Elementary Charter, Lost Lake Elementary, Leesburg Elementary, Mount Dora Middle, Windy Hill Middle, Umatilla Middle, Pine Ridge Elementary, Cypress Ridge, Spring Creek, South Lake High, Lake Mineola High, and Imagine Schools.
That's it.
So my list is accurate. Good.
I feel like it is, you know.
So congratulations, Vin.
When this came out the other day, it was like, we did the math 8 ways to Sunday, but none of us knew about the 3 method thing, so. Yeah, and to Tony and Amy too. Thank you.
So so that's kind of where we're at with best and brightest. As soon as the data shifts over, then I'll have, obviously the key data points we need are the new teachers in the recruitment that are in those specified areas, because it's not all new ones. Last year we had about 200. There's probably a slight uptick on that, but not drastic, because they're in those specified areas. And then we'll see how many fall in to the buckets for the retention. I can tell you, if it was just data based on where they qualified, but not whether they've been there for 2 years, you're looking at affecting about 1,200 people, but I think that number's gonna dip once we lay how long they've been at those schools. Not super significantly, but I can see it dipping by maybe a couple hundred or something once you factor in transfers and departures and things like that, but we'll see. Maybe not that many.
Now, when they look at the evaluation, do they look at BAM scores or the school's type E scores?
For that, we'll look at the summative is what that'll be based on. I'm almost certain. I'll double check and make sure.
Right? I just don't want to be blindsided.
Gotcha. Well, and that was our thing that was included, and I wanted to double check with you, because on the MOU language that you guys kind of gave me for some framework, it said that it will be on their instructional practice score and their total score, but the and meant the way I read it is that they had to have it on both. So I want to make sure
Summative score.
is the idea is to use summative so it's most
summative,
inclusive.
right.
Okay, all right, that was all.
Keep life simple.
So next time we come together, I should have numbers and a complete framework that we just have to drop numbers into. So that's best and brightest and where we're at. Does anybody have any questions on best and brightest? I will say that evidently DeSantis put out some vague but kind of direct comments that he doesn't suspect best and brightest might live into next year. We all know that'll be interesting to see what that looks like.
Yeah, we'll see.
They're telling there'll be a major difference for teachers, but we'll see what that means, as you know. So, and from one of our teacher-friendlier legislators and also head of the Superintendent's Association, Senator Mofford, he used cautiously optimistic. So, and he usually has a pretty good read on things. So that means we don't know. So that's where we're at on best and brightest. You guys ready to talk some security cameras?
Or since we're talking money items here, is there a money proposal as yet?
Do not have a compensation proposal for today. No, sir.
Okay.
But has the budget gone before the board already? How can it do that before teachers are even offered any money? How can-
Budgets can be amended at any time. Budget can be considered a living, breathing document, just like when you guys got raises last year.
No.
A budget amendment is made, to consider that. So that's kind of where the budget plays in.
Because that's where a lot of teachers are very upset, because they feel that the budget should not have been, you know,
It wasn't the prior year.
I know, I just wanted to bring that and have to,
Well, I think it's, people are gonna have different ways of looking at it, but if they look back and the track records, that's not a determining factor
right, I just wanted
of
to
whether it
bring back
occurs
the
or
correct.
not. And, we just wanna make sure that we have recurring revenues to support recurring expenditures.
Okay,
that come
thank you.
about.
Okay, the mental health liaisons,
Yes.
is there a reason why we didn't include those in bargaining unit?
As I communicate with you, I don't feel
Never
like
gave
it's
a
a
definition.
bargaining topic. If you'd like to discuss that, then we can discuss it away from the bargaining table. They're not currently part of the unit. I can tell you that they currently, it's about half and half. People that came from the outside world that do not have teaching backgrounds or teaching certificates, and then you've got half that moved over from social work and from guidance counseling that has some education. So that's just telling you some numbers on that, but as far as discussing them being in or out of the unit, there's processes and things for that. And if you want to discuss it away from the table, I'm willing to do that.
Well, we're throwing money, do we know the starting rate for the mental health liaisons?
I can tell you, if you go down and look at the mental health liaisons, that average probably increased depending on who they were. I don't have a direct average, but it's probably between $5,000 and $7,000 if they move from an internal, say a guidance counselor position and moved into the professional managerial track where they're at, and took on that position.
Can
So
I
that-
ask another question?
There are some though that would have came over and chose not to because the way we've factored experience and applied experience didn't behoove them to move over and do that.
Why are they now considered managerial?
When we created the new position, we established them as professional managerial.
But they don't supervise anything. Do they supervise?
What's that?
OTs, PTs don't supervise.
Yeah, they're not the only ones that don't supervise, but
But they have specialized degrees and certification and credentials.
some, but not all of them are.
OTs and PTs would.
Oh. Anyway, that's as much as I'm wanting to discuss that in
Okay,
bargaining.
one other question. I thought I saw something where they are starting first year at more than a teacher, 53 something.
That is absolutely false. And I can tell you, there's also people running around whispering other false things, like they're getting these huge increases in excess of, $15,000, $20,000, and that's absolutely false. And anybody that's spreading that is just lying.
So the list I got from salaries from Scott would be incorrect.
I don't know what list you got. But I can tell you that as part of the compensation committee for the district, I sat on that committee and we evaluated each person that came in for those positions. So now I'm done.
Okay. And then through the list from Scott.
Any any list you got from anyone would not have had any years of experience or past experience attributed to their salaries that you have on that list.
This is a list of all salaries of all teachers and personnel, without names. But by school. And I'm seeing, what school is this? Mental health liaison, 53,586.
Do you think there's a teacher in that same school that makes 53 or more? Because based on their years of experience or their experience,
Teachers top out at 52.
they don't top out anymore. We removed the cap off the salary.
Well, for 1 year, so I'm just going by the list that I got as a,
The list that you have does not take into consideration the experience that those people bring to the table as they're placed in those positions, and how those salaries are considered and determined. But if you would like to meet and discuss, I have no problem with that, and I can actually pull the information that shows how we calculated and arrived at those salaries. And if it was, say for instance, if it was a guidance counselor, it was year for year, because that was counseling experience. But if it was just a classroom teacher, that would not necessarily say that while you had experience working with children, I wouldn't say that you had experience in that field. So it would be for every 4 years, you got 1 year's experience towards the position. So it's not like there was no willy-nilly, there was method behind each and every salary and where people would take the place.
but this is showing them all the same at 53,586.
That might, I don't know what you're looking at, and that's not right. So if it's what Scott sent you, I haven't seen what Scott sent you, so I would have to see that and evaluate it and discuss that.
I'll send it to you, because that is part of the records request of all salaries, public records by school.
I have by individual with their years of experience and the evaluation of, and how all of them were logically arrived at. So I'd say that my data is probably deeper than what you've got there.
Just going by what the finance office sent me.
And that,
Scott's records are correct.
That's what I'm hearing.
now what you're hearing is you've got more surface level data that you're trying to tout as being something that is inaccurate and apply it to you guys' perception of what those numbers are. So rather than, I would be more inclined to say what you guys are saying is manipulative than Scott's information is inaccurate.
Then we'll look forward to an opportunity to reconcile.
Discuss it, yes. And I will send this to you. 168 pages of salary at each school. Sent on September 20th.
I also would like to point out that those are not general fund dollars that pay those salaries. Those are dollars that came from the new safety referendum that we're using to support the mental health needs of kids as in response to the tragedies that have happened, to make sure that everybody's as safe and secure as possible. That's not general fund dollars that would be used for instructional increases in salary.
But then it was, as we passed that, it was, the concept was, would free up other monies. So,
There's a possibility of that byproduct. I think anytime you have
but I'm just looking at,
grant dollars or referendum dollars take over something like that, but that was not the intent of that could be a byproduct, but that's not the intent of the referendum.
okay. I just sent that to you.
and give you guys a couple minutes to review that in comparison to what you presented last.
That's correct.
This correctly, this is saying that, recordings could be used, for discipline action, but nowhere in there does it state that it could be used for evaluation.
We definitely, and this definitely is not perfect language, so you're saying the addition of some language that says it cannot be used for evaluation. Is that what you're? Cause
I don't see that in here, and I would just wanna make sure that I know what our concerns are. I wanna make sure that what you're saying is what you want to be saying.
I think it would, if what you're saying is that there needs to be language that prohibits it from being used for evaluation, then I agree, and we need to add in something that definitely says that. You know, when I'm looking into what you guys presented, and then I tried to balance some of that out and address some of the issue you guys mentioned, but then also I included, you know, access, and that came directly from our school board policy that addresses the use of them. And then as I look at you guys' language and look across other districts, it seems pretty close to what Clay's language has, minus some of the goodies. And in Clay's language, they did have a part that I like, and I wanted to ask you guys about today, because I know Mr. Class mentioned on several occasions about those common areas that also serve as classrooms. So they do include some information that it says any information gathered from cameras installed in common areas where teachers also provide instruction, parentheses, gyms, weight rooms, media centers, outside physical education areas, and etc., may not be used for evaluative purposes. And I think, to your point, you know, classrooms needs to be included in there also.
brought in, and I mean, nothing that we had even stated is what you have now counted proposed.
This is basically the policy.
This is, I mean, none of that, and that's one reason why we asked to kind of have something in there, because the policy didn't say, I mean, this is the policy.
Well, and I think that some of the pieces that are in what I counter proposed with were the pieces that were partially removed out of Clay's language, that where it looks like a lot of you guys' language was rooted from. So we're definitely, I'm definitely willing to look at Clay's language as a whole, if that's a direction we want to pursue, and I could counter propose with theirs, but I had language that I felt like was clear on our perspective of the video cameras, but I knew we would need to add in some more of you guys' perspective to that language.
Correct, because we are adding guardians and SROs and people sit and watch the video cameras and principals, and then they do disciplinary action against them because they sat and looked at something that's on the camera.
Because it's two-dimensional, you don't see.
What's that?
Because video is two-dimensional, it may look like something, but, and then we've had people looking at surveillance cameras to check whether teachers left their duty stations 30 seconds early. I mean,
Well, as far as first of all, nobody should be disciplined for leaving their duty station 30 seconds early if this is a one-time occurrence or an occasional. Well, I haven't seen that, and you guys have not brought that to my attention on a specific instance. I've heard of rumors of it, but I haven't seen on a specific instance.
didn't Pat Victoria give you names?
The only thing that I've heard of was one instance. I thought that was someone arriving at work late. Was it a duty station? So I apologize if I misspoke there, but that one instance was one person at a duty station. You are correct. That person did discuss that with me, which occurred last year and was never brought to my attention at the time that any type of discipline was even being considered for that individual. Because I feel pretty sure that if somebody was just being, I would expect you guys to hop on the horn pretty quickly. I mean, you communicate with me well when we feel like there's some type of, when people are being nitpicky or things aren't going the right way. So if I don't know about them, there's nothing I can do. But I don't see where it's that happens at any great frequency or really other than maybe a few random occurrences that something like that's occurred.
But this is opening Pandora's box.
How so?
School personnel may view relevant portions of video. And then disciplinary charges can be used by what's in the video. So it's like we're now saying it's okay to use surveillance video to investigate and or to take disciplinary action.
So if you go back to the intent of the cameras, and we know what those are, but safety and security of students. So if that's jeopardized by an instructional employee, the safety of a student, which has happened, probably on more occurrences of people being disciplined for leaving their duty post 30 seconds early, and that footage is what protects a child. We don't want to be able to use that in a disciplinary proceeding against an employee that has harmed a child or puts, I'm a little confused on why. I mean, who are we trying to protect here? Are we trying to protect the innocent, or are we trying to protect someone who could possibly be guilty? Because I don't see how it's a risk for teachers that don't have any type of issues. And I'm absolutely willing to discuss minor infractions that that are just on a random occurrence.
I guess my concern comes into opening the door of disciplinary, because it did happen last year.
Yes, it did.
And I know there are schools that have cameras in the media center where FSA is administered. And now you have just opened the door with this.
I don't feel like
And that's
security
not the
cameras
safety and
and,
security of the student.
no, I don't feel like it is, but I also don't really feel like it's a testing compromise situation either. You don't have those cameras where they can focus in on what the content of the test is, or,
But when it comes to disciplinary action, if there is a question and all you see is a view from there and we're allowing people to view it, it could mean someone's license.
Or a situation where you weren't in the camera, so therefore you must not have turned in the money that you said you did.
Which
But
is
that-
why in what we had said, the one statement in ours said, no disciplinary action will be taken nor adverse evaluation made against an employee based solely upon photographs and/or any recordings by cell phones, tapes, or other recording devices.
and
Based solely on that video.
but the part you left off from where you got that I plays language is where it wraps up of saying, or recording without an investigation. So there was some rearranged there. So basically it's saying that it could not be used at a school if an investigation was not to occur, that you couldn't just solely grab a piece of footage and discipline someone with it without an investigation. So there's,
That's not what it says.
what's not.
You can easily put that in there, and that little caveat in there or something. I mean, at least that would say that it's still not based solely on that. This here, when you look at what you've presented, now again, yes, safety and security. So there could be all kinds of things to that. But again, we see the other side where cameras are used quite often in a disciplinary, which has nothing to do with the safety or security.
I'm not sure quite often is accurate, but since I review any discipline cases that usually involve that. But what I would say also though is, I can tell you there's been times where video footage has proved that a teacher had no wrongdoing and proved false accusations, and things did not occur, so it protects them in that way also.
And that's why the language in ours says, without the teacher's permission. So if it is going to do what you say, the teacher, of course, is going to get permission. Yes, use that video. That's why we had that caveat in there for that reason.
So help me understand, other than a person leaving their duty post 30 seconds early, and perhaps if someone's questioned on a testing violation where it's difficult to tell or discern whether or not that something wrong occurred, and that could put your certificate in jeopardy, I agree. What other instances do we need to make sure that, what we're protecting teachers from discipline from if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or if they're committing a behavior that is not appropriate?
Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to get to, I don't know how much specifics I can say, but in one instance I'm aware of, it was to discredit the employee wasn't where they were supposed to be at a certain time.
It was an error of omission, basically.
Exactly, yet there was only a selected time period of a video looked at, and it was not an appropriate timeline that would really have been appropriate to help this employee out, to see whether or not they were or were not at the spot they said they were at.
And knowing the video is two-dimensional, then I think even Stephanie Luke's kids put videos up where it looked like they were punching each other. And if you just looked at the video, it looked like they were hitting each other. But you knew they weren't, but you knew it was fake. But the video by itself, because it's two-dimensional, gave that impression. And so we need to be very careful if we're using just video as the basis for discipline. And that's why we had the language in there about not being used as the sole source.
And this here doesn't really say anything about safety and security, is what this is saying. It's just talking about video cameras. So this isn't talking about the safety of a child or the security of what is going
It could
on.
be a student.
This could be anything that is the way this is reading right here, because it is talking about video footage of personnel committing acts of it or exhibiting behavior that would warrant disciplinary action. That could be anything at all. Nothing is saying in here that it's because of safety of a child.
I mean, we know, since we're allowing students to have their phones with them at all times, and we know that the phones can be edited, that a video can be taken by a student of a teacher and made to look a certain way. So that's why this was looking at just video in general. Thank you. No, I was commenting on
The
noise.
the noise. I figured it was my punctuation.
If, I mean, I think if we want to revisit, I mean, I can tell you what Clay's, what they had in theirs, which couples with a lot of what you guys have put forward, is notwithstanding the article for teacher discipline, disciplinary action should not be taken nor adverse evaluation made against an employee based solely on electronic monitoring or recording without an investigation. So essentially the components, that is what the employee relations side of my life does, is because there is an investigation that's thorough, that anything that could appear to where a two-dimensional image on a camera does not provide sufficient evidence to prove wrongdoing, then it...
Therefore, it would be the same thing as what they're saying. It could not be used solely as
Yeah,
exactly what that is.
because it's an investigation, but
That's not what you're
even if, no, that's not what this says.
No, that's not what this says.
It says we're recording without an investigation. So basically what this is saying is if an investigation is coming up the line, then once it reached,
Why can't you just add in there, if an investigation of student safety and security comes under investigation?
And then the other issue is even if it's determined to be bogus, we've now taken 30 days of instructional time away from that student while we're investigating.
I can tell you, since I'm the one who places those people, from experience, that very rarely occurs, but sometimes it does take time to make sure that someone's taken care of. I can think of one that probably lasted a couple weeks last year, and based on video evidence, that person got to go back to work and didn't have discipline.
But it took over 30 days.
Because there was a thorough investigation and we didn't rely solely on the video, and we made sure.
So that's what we're saying.
I agree, but
So I'm glad
it's
you
not
did
that it can be solely, the whole thing is there has to be an investigation that occurs.
So do we want to propose edits to this to make it acceptable? Or start over?
If I could start with maybe a favorable suggestion to you guys' direction, is basically saying that maybe establishing like Clay had where cameras will not be, but which is restrooms, classrooms, closed door offices is the way it's probably officially referred to, and staff and faculty lounges, because then that excludes some of the areas. And then also adding in the information gathered, installed in common areas where teachers also provide instruction, gyms, weight rooms, media centers, outside physical education areas, etc., may not be used for evaluative purposes. And that provides some safeguard what you mentioned on the evaluative side. And it also establishes what you guys have talked about, security cameras not being installed in classrooms. And some of the stuff that I did leave out, I'd like to provide a little explanation on that, because I don't want you to think I ignored the presented language, proposed language. And the signs indicating that there's footage in the facility, to be honest with you, I think it's pretty safe to assume that there's security cameras in every school that you're going to walk on moving forward anywhere. But
that was a legal requirement.
What's that?
And if people are under video.
It is not a legal requirement.
It's not?
No, it's not. I checked on that because I wasn't sure. And so there might be some schools that have those signs and some that don't, but part of the discussion there is, one, establishing anything that heightens a criminal's awareness of their surroundings. It could be used for deterrence. However, it definitely has an impact on the safety plan, but also it opens the door for a ton of liability and public records requests from the general public that feel they might have access to the footage from those cameras, and whether it's redacted or not redacted. And then the assumption that because we're saying the campus is under video surveillance, obviously not every area is covered under video surveillance. So you get into being sued for somebody a slip and fall on the sidewalk that was in a blind area. Well, I thought you said you had video surveillance. How come that? And so that opens the door for a lot of liability there also as far as the signage. So that's why I left part of that off.